ken et ha'olam, to repair the world. So many of these congregations are seeking ways not just to strengthen their own synagogues and communities, but to help others learn from their examples as well. To celebrate their work, the Commission on Social Action honors congregations with outstanding social justice programming with the Irving J. Fain Award, created in memory of a passionate proponent of social justice who served for a decade as the Commission's chair. This was my second time chairing the Fain Committee, and as I or any of my fellow committee members can tell you, this work just keeps on getting more inspiring. I know that all of us marveled at the depth of commitment to social action and the breadth of creativity evident throughout our movement. Before we go further, I'd like to thank the incredible commission members who helped with this year's Fain Award selection process. They are Mark Anshin, Julie Bank, Diane Baer, Rabbi Josh Brown, Mark Bookbinder, Diana Einstein, Stephanie Gary, Cheryl Gutman, and Jennifer Kaufman. Thank you. And a special word of thanks to Isaac Newell, without whom none of this would happen. This year's winning programs come from large and small congregations, and each has components that can be replicated by any congregation. I hope we will all take the time to find inspiration in their work and learn from their successes, and I hope that many of you had the opportunity to do that at lunch today. So, without further delay, our first award is presented to Central Reform Congregation in St. Louis, Missouri. Following the death of Michael Brown that made headlines across the country, Central Reform Congregation promoted nonviolent civil disobedience and served as a sanctuary for those who protested the decision not to indict the officer involved. CRC's lay and professional leaders provided spiritual, psychological, medical, and legal support to police and to protesters. The congregation has also been on the front lines advocating for stronger relationships and needed reforms in their community. I'm not sure who's here. Our next award goes to Congregation Road of Sholem in San Rafael, California, for their program Crossing the Street, a shul, a school, and an evolving covenant. This program fostered enduring relationships across ethnic, religious, and socioeconomic lines between members of the congregation and the Venetia Valley school community. This initiative has included joint programming, tutoring, and the congregation even raised more than $60,000 to hire a literacy specialist for the school and provide swimming lessons for 25 students. In all, the initiative has helped bridge two communities that, while physically close, would otherwise be distant. Congratulations. Our third award goes to Congregation Sinai in Fox Point, Wisconsin, for their program Miklat, Spaces of Refuge. Milwaukee has a growing population of undocumented immigrants, many of whom have fled repressive and dangerous regimes. This program set out to educate congregants about the issues facing the vulnerable populations among us and to empower congregants to advocate for individuals and families facing deportation and family separation. Congregation Sinai ran an interfaith immigrant freedom Seder, accompanied immigrants to court appointments, and provided sanctuary to people at risk of deportation. Mount Zion Temple in St. Paul, Minnesota is recognized for their program, A Year of Tzedek, Having the Conversation. This year-long program brought social justice to the forefront of congregational life through lay and professionally led workshops, Shabbat conversations about Jewish values, meetings with members of the state legislature, and even a trip to Uganda. Our fifth award goes to Temple Avodat Shalom in River Edge, New Jersey, for their program, Getting to Know You, Muslim-Jewish Teen Dialogue. This program created a safe space for local high school students to cross religious divides and build relationships. The students were empowered to examine similarities and differences between their religions. Combating Islamophobia and anti-Semitism was only the beginning. After helping barriers between the two communities, teen participants came together to serve thousands of meals through a food packing event for a local pantry. Temple to Hirsch Sinai of Seattle, Washington wins a FAIN Award for their campaign for gun responsibility. In the aftermath of the horrific Sandy Hook shooting, the Temple mobilized an interfaith coalition to support Initiative 594, which closed the background check loophole in Washington state. Through educational forums, prayer vigils, and marches, the congregation helped build widespread community support for and succeeded in the passage of this crucial ballot initiative. Our 7th award goes to Temple Har Shalom of Warren, New Jersey for their program, Need to Feed. Through baking and selling artisan challah, Har Shalom built a stronger sense of community, engaging members of their congregation through the exploration of Jewish culinary art and raising more than $20,000 to fight hunger in New Jersey. Temple Isaiah in Los Angeles, California, is recognized for their Roots and Wings initiative, a comprehensive mentorship program aimed at helping students at underperforming schools to graduate from high school and enroll in college. Mentors from the congregation meet with students twice a month to build relationships and help students develop a career path. 94% of students in this year's program indicated that they plan to continue their studies after high school. Our last FAIN Award goes to Temple Israel in Boston, Massachusetts for their Tikkun curriculum, an in-depth experience building on the Religious Action Center's L'Taken Social Justice Seminar for teenagers. With classroom-based learning and a lobby day at the Massachusetts State House, the program empowers teens to be voices for justice and to take action to make their state and our world a more just place. Please join me in congratulating all of our 9 FAIN awards. In addition to these 9 FAIN Award winners, 4 congregations have received honorable mentions for their social justice work. Our first honorable mention goes to Congregation Ahavat Beth Israel in Boise, Idaho, for their community garden, where volunteers and program participants contribute to food-insecure community members while learning about the environmental aspect of the Jewish faith. The congregation also provides the local Somali refugee community with free plots of land to cultivate and has helped teach them sustainable farming practices using native crops. Congregation Shomrei Torah in Santa Rosa, California, is honored for taking social action to the movies. Through film screenings and discussion panels geared to social justice concerns, the congregation has fostered thoughtful discussions and action on issues including domestic violence and more. Temple Emmanuel in Dallas, Texas, receives an honorable mention for their creative and effective approach to bar and bat mitzvah service projects, nurturing the next generation of social justice activists through regular interactions with community organizations, from community gardens to seniors' residences and food banks. And our last honorable mention goes to Temple Beth El of Boca Raton for raising awareness of the ongoing fight for LGBT inclusion through a series of speakers, discussion sessions, and thoughtfully changing congregational practices to ensure that they are an open and inclusive community. Please join me in congratulating our honorable mention programs.
Hi, my name is Liz Dunst. I'm Temple Sinai in Washington, D.C. This year, we are proud to celebrate the first ever Rabbi Richard G. Hirsch International Social Justice Award. Named after the Religious Action Center's founding director, the award honors a World Union for Progressive Judaism congregation or an affiliated program engaged in outstanding social justice work. Many of us in this room know Rabbi Hirsch, and those of us who don't, you should all know that we are all the beneficiaries of his visionary leadership of the RAC and of the reform movement's social justice work more broadly. Under his leadership, the RAC played a key role in the passage, as you have heard today, in the landmark Civil Rights Act. In 1973, Rabbi Hirsch became the executive director of the World Union for Progressive Judaism, where he championed the growth of our movement around the world and helped us to take root, quite literally, in the land of Israel by establishing Yohel and Lotan, the two reform kibbutzim in Negev. After making Aliyah many years ago, Rabbi Hirsch remained a tireless advocate for the global progressive Jewish community, and this award embodies the spirit of his continuing work. This year, we received more than a dozen applications from progressive congregations in Brazil, South Africa, Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, Australia, and Israel. Reading the applications, as you can imagine, was really inspiring. It's going to come as no surprise to those of you who are committed to social justice that at the heart of progressive Judaism, no matter where you are in the world, there is a commitment to pursue justice, a determination to right the wrongs, and a willingness to speak truth to power. A few examples. We have Bet David, a congregation in the Johannesburg suburbs which began during apartheid, a secret school for black children living in the nearby Alexandria Township. Despite the possibility of heavy fines and even criminal penalties, they stayed the course, and their school is now in its 29th year. Other programs serve the critical needs within our own community. In Odessa last year, Emmanuel Progressive Jewish Congregation launched an outreach and inclusion program for families with children with Down syndrome. In Rio, our congregation runs a jobs skills training and a placement program for young adults with developmental disabilities. I've highlighted just a few of these programs, and I hope you can read on the, since I can't see that far, I hope you can read. You can go on the RAC website or the World Union for Progressive Judaism Hirsch Award website and read about all of them. I was honored, really, to serve as the chair of this year's selection committee, which was jointly organized by the Commission on Social Action and the World Union of Progressive Judaism. And I'd like especially to thank our small committee that worked very hard, because Isaac really ran us unmercifully and wonderfully. Isaac, thank you. Our members were Rabbi Danny Berkman, Lynn Magid-Lazar, and Miriam Kramer. With so many outstanding programs, it was really difficult to choose one as the winner, but of course, we did so. The awardee for 2015 is Ganechem Beit Shmuel Early Childhood Center in Jerusalem. This center provides kindergarten classes and a pluralistic Jewish education in Jerusalem. Over its 25-year history, the center has served thousands of children. But what's really important as well is 4 years ago, their work changed forever when they accepted children of asylum seekers and foreign workers into their program. As you can imagine, it immediately became clear that both the educational and psychosocial needs of these children was vastly different than what they had seen before. Many of these children had traveled thousands of miles, fleeing violence in their home countries. Some were facing the threat of deportation. Nearly all of them lived in abject poverty, and many had below average or no Hebrew skills. It became clear quickly to the center that it on its own did not have all of the tools necessary to help these children. So they partnered with the Educational Department of the Municipality of Jerusalem, Hebrew University's School of Occupational Therapy, and even the Catholic, I shouldn't say even, and the Catholic Church, which was able to fulfill the spiritual needs of the program's Filipino students. Over the past 4 years, this program has grown rapidly. It's now really the leader in pre-kindergarten programming for children with special needs. And this year, for the first time, a class is being added to help prepare students with Down syndrome for the Israeli educational system. But the work of this center does not stop with the students. The center's staff and their many volunteers help parents address health, welfare, and even human rights concerns, and they advocate for better learning conditions for these students in the Israeli public school system. Their work is really a true embodiment of Rabbi Hirsch's selflessness, dedication, and commitment to social justice. They are not here. Hopefully they will be in Rio, because we will also be doing this at the World Union for Progressive Judaism Conference in Rio, and I hope many of you will join us there. But please join me here in congratulating Ganechem and the other programs on their really incredible success in the name of progressive Judaism.
Several months ago, when we began planning this consultation on conscience, we invited Evan Wolfson to join us. Evan is the founder and CEO of Freedom to Marry, one of the country's leading organizations when it comes to marriage equality. By the way, if Evan looks vaguely familiar, it may be because you saw him yesterday morning on Face the Nation. We were thrilled when he agreed to join us, thinking we were just getting a smart, compelling, dynamic, and visionary speaker. What we didn't know is that our timing would also be impeccable. Tomorrow morning, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in Obergefell versus Hodges, a case that has the potential to finally make marriage equality a reality for Americans in all 50 states. The fact that the nation has reached this milestone is due in many ways to Evan Wolfson. In the interest of full disclosure, Evan was one of my sister's best friends in college, and we've been friends for more than 30, maybe 35 years. Evan grew up in Pittsburgh, went to Yale, served in the Peace Corps in Togo, went to Harvard Law School, and in 1983, 22 years ago, wrote his thesis on same-sex marriage, a notion that at that time seemed ludicrous to most. After a stint in the Brooklyn DA's office and a time working as special counsel with Lawrence Walsh on Iran-Contra, Evan went to work for Lambda Legal Defense Fund, directing the Marriage Project. He served as co-counsel in Hawaii's landmark marriage equality case, helped make civil unions a reality in Vermont, and argued before the US Supreme Court in the case of Boy Scouts of America versus Dale. In 2003, Evan founded Freedom to Marry and began building it into the powerhouse civil rights entity it is today. He authored the book, Why Marriage Matters, America, Equality, and Gay People's Right to Marry, and has taught at various universities. It's not at all surprising that Time magazine has named him one of the most influential people in the world. However, you may not know about Evan's work in an even more significant case, Kaufman versus Kaufman, a 1991 dispute that gave the world one of the first inklings that Evan was truly an outstanding advocate. The Kaufmans in this case were me and my then 12-year-old son, Daniel. Daniel's greatest desire at that time was to see Terminator 2, which had just come out. Being a sensible mother, I said, no way, absolutely not, totally inappropriate for a 12-year-old. Evan happened to come out for a visit while Daniel was in the middle of his hard-fought campaign, and he enlisted Evan to help. Those of you who know me know that I can be tough, but I'm also open to reason. I can't remember exactly what Evan said, but he pointed out that Daniel was very grounded, could tell fact from fiction, and was unlikely to turn into a sociopath if he saw the movie. Daniel went to the movie and has loved Evan ever since, and I like to think that we provided a good training ground for honing his Evan's advocacy skills. We're all very proud of Evan's work in the field of marriage equality, but I'm hoping that after Tuesday's arguments and a subsequent Supreme Court decision, Evan will be out of a job. Please join me in welcoming Evan Wolfson.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it is really wonderful to be among friends, and you all are friends and fellow champions, and you are all part of the moment that we're all feeling today as we look toward tomorrow. The fact of the matter is, all across the country, everyone, whether they're happy about it or not, and most of them are, everybody can feel the momentum. Everybody can feel this hope. And as we enter the court tomorrow, we go in knowing that we have made the strongest possible case we could make to the country, to the court, and to the court of public opinion. And we're all very, very hopeful. We're very, very hopeful that this will be the culmination of this decades-long struggle to end exclusion from marriage, and yes, to put me out of a job. Now, you all know that we have come a very long way since the days when gay people first sought the freedom to marry. Gay people have sought the freedom to marry ever since the dawn of what we call the modern gay rights movement. We usually date that, a little erroneously, to Stonewall and the Stonewall Revolt in 1969. Within 3 years of Stonewall, couples were challenging the denial of the freedom to marry in cases that were making their way through the courts in at least 3 states, and one of those cases even reached the Supreme Court. And in 1972, the Supreme Court, like all the other courts, rubber-stamped away this claim of gay people for the freedom to marry. That is the beginning of what has now been a decades-long struggle enlisting non-gay as well as gay voices into the huge work of not only changing the law, but changing the hearts and minds and understanding so that the law could change. And today, 4 decades later, we now have 2/3 of the American people, a little more actually, 70%, living in the 37 states where gay people can now marry, up from 0 little more than a decade ago. You can clap that. Now, 37 is not good enough, which is why we're going into that court tomorrow. But this is a huge historical shift. And we now have the support for the freedom to marry of 63% of the American people, a supermajority, up from 27% when 20 years ago I, with my non-gay co-counsel, were in that courtroom in Hawaii where we really launched this ongoing global movement. Now, I told you that in the 70s, the very early 70s, couples sought the freedom to marry and were rubber-stamped away. And here we are now with 37 states and 63%, up from 27% in that Hawaii case, the second wave of litigation. Why did this second wave of litigation, couples seeking the freedom to marry, most notably in Hawaii in the 90s, yield an ongoing global movement and this momentum we all feel, and these 37 states and the 63% support, and the 20 countries on 5 continents where gay people can now marry, up from 0 a little more than a decade ago? Why did the first one fail when the second one put us on this trajectory to bend the arc of justice to where it needs to be? Well, the answer is, first and foremost, because of what came in between that first wave of litigation in the 70s and that second wave of litigation in the 90s led by the Hawaii case. And what came in between was AIDS. AIDS shattered the silence about gay people's lives. AIDS forced non-gay people to see gay people as we really are, people who love, people who grieve, people who were fighting for our loved ones, people who cared, people who were being harmed. and it touched hearts and opened minds. And AIDS also forced gay people to understand the consequences of being denied the freedom to marry. AIDS forced gay people to come to see how vulnerable we are in being excluded from legal protections and family respect and the freedom to marry. AIDS transformed our movement from a movement that had been primarily about being let alone. Don't harass us, don't arrest us, let us live our lives, into a movement to be let in. Let us participate, let us share, let us be part of the family, let us be under the law, let us marry. Now that transformation from an obviously horrible outside event bent the course of history. And when those next wave of couples stepped forward in Hawaii and the next wave, the country was now ready to begin hearing and to begin seeing what had always been there. Now, I told you the benchmarks of progress and the reasons we all feel this hope and momentum going into the court tomorrow. 63% public support, more than double where it was less than 20 years ago. 37 states, up from 0. But there's another benchmark that has underscored this momentum and the reason we're all so hopeful about how we're going to do when the Supreme Court rules, most likely come June. And that is that in the last 2 years, we have won 65 state and federal court rulings in favor of the freedom to marry. Courts all across the country with Republican-appointed judges as well as Democratic. 14 out of 19 Republican judges who've ruled in the last 2 years have ruled in favor of the freedom to marry. My favorite passage in all of those 65 rulings in favor of the freedom to marry came in the case where we won the freedom to marry and brought it to Utah, ruby red Utah, where we now have the freedom to marry. And in that case, Judge Shelby wrote, "It is not the Constitution that has changed. It's our knowledge of what it means to be lesbian or gay." In that passage, Judge Shelby captured how this civil rights movement has come so far, how this transformation has occurred, and why we stand in front of the Supreme Court confident that we can now tell the justices and show the justices that America is ready. It's not that the Constitution changed. It's not that the law is now clear in a way that it wasn't before. It's that people's eyes have opened. We've opened people's eyes. And how did that happen? That happened, again, through 4+ decades of people telling their stories, showing their truths, enlisting partners and allies, engaging hearts and minds, pulling on common values, what the Vermont Supreme Court called our common humanity, to get non-gay people to think anew. Now, no one organization, no one person, no one case, no one battle, no one methodology, no one decade did all of this. It took millions of conversations and millions of dollars and millions of people and multitudes of battles in which we move this forward. It took a movement. It is a movement of people and conversations and allies and investments and struggle that have brought us to this transformation. It is a movement, people working together, that changed hearts and opened eyes. And at the same time, this movement wasn't just a concatenation of random events where just things happened and whatever took place, and here we are 4 decades later, and miraculously we're in the Supreme Court. This movement also followed a strategy. Now, not everybody knew they were following a strategy. Not everybody agreed all the time with the strategy. But a critical mass of people and organizations and allies and donors, and then analysts and writers and public officials came into a strategy. And that strategy was also driven by a campaign. Freedom to Marry, my organization, was created, unlike the other organizations we work with, unlike the Union of Reformed Judaism and the others we've called into this struggle and who have stepped up courageously and boldly and early in the case of Reformed Judaism. Freedom to Marry, unlike many of the players and partners in this work, was created as a campaign with a finite life and a finite goal to drive a strategy forward, not to do every piece of it, but to make sure that that strategy was being propelled so that the movement's engagement would bend in the right direction and get us where we needed to go. And that combination of movement and inspiring and engaging and enlisting a movement and strategy and having clarity about goal, clarity about what's needed, clarity about how to move it forward, clarity about where the gaps are and how to fill them, and a campaign entity to wake up every day, eyes on the prize, with focus and drive and a savvy, hopefully, blend of leadership and partnership, knowing how to make room for everyone to bring their piece to the larger whole. It was that combination that imperfectly, but with relative success, has become a model now of how to get social change to happen. Now, for most of the years we were doing this, though we're looked on as a model today, it was pretty much a muddle. We didn't know every step of the way exactly how to do everything. We had many failures, many losses, many defeats, and much disagreement. And yet, overall, when you see it in its historical picture, these 4 decades of movement engagement, this sustained and affirmative commitment to a strategy, and the ability to come together and build a campaign to work with the many partners to make it happen, has now become a model of how we who care about mending the world can look to the work we are doing and how to get it more focused, more clear, more resourced, more inspiring, and more effective. And one of the great privileges of relative success, which some people see as overnight, and it only took 4 decades to get to that night, one of the great privileges is being able to point to elements of success and to be able to see the lessons learned, to be able to acknowledge the inheritance from other social justice movements on whose shoulders we stand and alongside whom we continue to fight because the work is never done, and to be able to offer those lessons so that when this campaign is done, knock on wood, the work of our movement can continue and do better, and the work of brother and sister movements, allied movements, movements whose goals we also share, can all do better. It is immensely, joyously gratifying to be standing now at what we hope will be the culmination of this strategy and see what we hope will be the end of this campaign, though not the movement, shimmering in sight. And to understand how remarkable that is, let me share with you what that strategy has been, that this campaign has driven and that the movement has delivered on as we get to this point of winning, though not yet won. The strategy for winning the freedom to marry we saw early on was that the way we were going to win, drawing on the lessons of social change and the history of law in this country and how marriage is governed and regulated in the US, was that we were going to win in the Supreme Court. We always believed that the way we would win was to win the freedom to marry by bringing the right case at the right time to, knock on wood, the right justices and get the right, how many do you need? 5, at least, to rule in our favor. But that strategy also for us always had 2 corollaries. Number one, it meant that if we were going to win in the Supreme Court, if it was the Supreme Court that was going to bring the country to national resolution, it meant that we didn't have to win every single person. We didn't have to persuade everyone. It meant that we didn't have to win within the four corners of every single state, plodding through Mississippi in 2030. That was never the strategy. And the second corollary, though, was that although we didn't have to win every person, and though we didn't have to win every state, we had to win over enough people, and we had to win enough states. We had to build, in other words, a critical mass of states and a critical mass of public support that would together create the climate and say to the justices, number one, America is ready. You can do this. Enough people, enough states are there. You can finish the job. And number two, we had to be saying to them, every day of denial, the states and families left out, it's unfair, it's injurious, it's an indignity. It needs to end, and therefore you must take action now. And as we go into the Supreme Court tomorrow, we at Freedom to Marry, all of us who've been part of this movement, and even the opponents, can feel that we have shown to the court America is ready, and it's time. It's unfair to leave out the 13 states, the families still hurting, the children still growing up without the dignity and respect accorded to their family and the stability and security that conveys, without the safety net of tangible and intangible protections. It's not fair, it's wrong, and it hurts every day if parents die before they get to see their children wed. If children grow up in an unstable environment, if parents worry about not being able to provide the best security for their kids, if any one of us is left bereft or vulnerable in a life crisis that we needn't have endured had the law treated us right. And so driving this strategy forward with relative clarity and with relative focus and now relative success, we have built to this moment. Now, if the Supreme Court rules in our favor, as we all hope it will, as most experts predict that it will, and if that ruling comes, let's say, at the end of June, as gay rights rulings tend to come, but it's the Supreme Court, they can do whatever they want, the work of this campaign, Freedom to Marry, will be done. But the work of our movement will be far from done. Gay people, transgender people, lesbians, bisexual, gay men, all of us remain vulnerable still because there's still much discrimination and much exclusion in front of us. And winning the freedom to marry, powerful and important and transformative as it has already been in the critical mass and as it will be when the conversation comes fully home everywhere, winning the freedom to marry is not the sum total of what we aspire to. We aspire to everything. And until we have federal civil rights protection, until we have laws that safeguard our ability to work, to buy and rent real estate and homes, to participate and be served and be accommodated in restaurants and theaters and, yes, bakeries, until our youth are secure and safe and protected and affirmed, until our senior citizens are able to grow old and be treated with dignity and be accorded respect for their relationships and not have to go back into the closet in their 8th or 9th decade, until we have the full guarantee of rounded and happy and fulfilled and contributing lives in every part of the country, the work of our movement, the work of the larger movement, is not done. And at the same time, what we need to do is not treat our accomplishments, our work, our years, our decades of struggle as some kind of checklist where we achieve something and it's done and somehow we now move to something else and pivot as if life has just been solidified and we can put this on the shelf and now turn to something else when we all know painfully, from so many civil rights chapters and ongoing struggles, and when we all know from our daily lives that it doesn't work that way. And so what we have the opportunity to do while confronting this challenge of ending discrimination and assuring rounded and happy lives of possibility everywhere moving forward, we have the opportunity to harness the power of this marriage win once we get it, to the conversations and continuing opening of hearts and minds in every corner of the country, including the places to which the conversation will really come for the first time once we win, as a way of helping people understand and see who lesbian and gay men and who transgender people and who our non-gay family and friends are, and why justice requires the golden rule of treating others as you'd want to be treated and the full dignity and protection under the law. And so we will harness this marriage conversation and this marriage win to the larger work still ahead, knowing, again, that it's not the Constitution that has to change. It's not the law that isn't clear. It's the knowledge. It's the getting people to see. It's the getting people to have the chance to rise to fairness. But I hope that one of the things people will take from this long and difficult and not overnight struggle, if we do indeed come to the victory we seek come June, I hope that one of the things people will take, perhaps more than anything else, is that luckily for us, we do live in a country which, despite its flaws, despite its regressions, despite its stumbles, but despite some of its dysfunction politically, is a country where things can change. It is a country where we can make a difference. My favorite, or one of them, inspirations that for years and years and years during the time I was out there as what some people called the Paul Revere of marriage, saying, we're winning in Hawaii, marriage is coming, get organized, get ready. During that period, I carried in my wallet a phrase from a woman named Hubertine Claire. And Hubertine Claire was a French suffragist. She was a fighter for the right of women to vote in 19th century France. And she battled to win women the right to vote. And she actually never lived to get the right to vote. But she fought. And she was one of the leaders. And in fact, she was even the woman who coined the word feminism. And Hubertine Claire said, and this is the mantra I carried with me all these years, if you would obtain a right, first you must proclaim it. If you want change, you must say we can do it. If you want other people to join, you must say it can happen. 10 minutes ago, people thought gay people would never win the freedom to marry. 10 minutes ago, people thought putting gay and marriage in the same sentence was an oxymoron. And here we are together, tomorrow entering the Supreme Court with 65 courts, 37 states, and 63% of the American people with us. We can make change. We can change things. We can mend the world.
Very honored now to welcome two of our reform movement's most powerful voices for social justice to join Evan and me in a discussion of marriage and equality and LGBT civil rights more broadly. Unless you have been out of the country, you've probably seen Rabbi Denise Eger's name in the news in the last few weeks. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Jewish Journal, the Globe and Mail, the Huffington Post, the Forward, all prominently covered her election as the Central Conference of American Rabbis' first openly gay president. Denise's leadership of the CCAR, though, is just one example of her raising her voice on behalf of the issues she cares about. She has been a leader in the Women's Rabbinic Network and is a past president of the Southern California Board of Rabbis and the Pacific Association of Reform Rabbis. And she's a founding member of both the Human Rights Campaign's Religion and Faith Council and California Faith for Equality. Denise has worked extensively with people with AIDS and is the past chair of the Task Force on Gays and Lesbians in the Rabbinate of the CCAR. She was instrumental in helping to pass the 2000 CCAR resolution in support of the officiation of gay and lesbian commitment ceremonies, and she's the co-author of the Reform Movement's guide to the liturgy guide for gay and lesbian wedding ceremonies. And in 2008, she officiated at the first legal wedding for a lesbian couple in Los Angeles. It is in recognition of her work that she has been featured among the Forward 50, recognizing the 50 most influential Jewish leaders in North America. Denise's compassion and visionary leadership is on display every day among the members of West Hollywood's Congregation Kol Ami, which she founded more than 20 years ago. I'm delighted to have her join us on this panel. I'm also pleased to welcome Rabbi Judy Schindler, who has for more than a decade been the senior rabbi at Temple Beth El in Charlotte, North Carolina. As one recent news profile of Judy began, she's a powerhouse in the Charlotte faith community. Judy is a past co-chair and a current member of the Clergy Advisory Board of Mecklenburg Ministries, an interfaith organization that promotes racial and ethnic understanding and addresses social needs of Charlotte. She has helped create 3 award-winning documentaries focusing on diversity in Charlotte schools, support for public schools, and affordable housing in Charlotte. She serves on the President's Rabbinic Council of HUC, as a past co-chair of the Women's Rabbinic Network and founding co-chair for the Kalsman Institute on Judaism and Health. She was also named Charlotte's Woman of the Year in 2011. Judy has been on the front lines of clergy, standing against efforts that prevent members of the LGBT community from achieving full civil equality. She has been a leader in the North Carolina interfaith community's work to ensure non-discrimination ordinances, including sexual orientation, gender expression, and gender identity. She has fought against measures that would impinge on her ability as a rabbi to sanctify and marry same-sex couples, and she has spoken forcefully against the bullying of LGBT youth. In the many ways she advances the legacy of her father, Rabbi Alexander Schindler, who nearly 30 years ago championed making our congregations open and inclusive of lesbian and gay congregants. I am delighted to call up Judy and to have Evan, Denise, and Judy join us for a panel for this extraordinary moment of time. Is this working? On? Okay, great. So Denise, in addition to this year and your installation, this is also the 25th year anniversary of HUC ordaining lesbian and gay rabbis. It's quite a year. And while the reform movement has done so much in matters of inclusion, there's always more work to be done. So I'm wondering what you think the next steps are for our movement in order to further LBGT inclusion in Jewish life and in our congregations.
Well, thank you for asking that very important question. And I think Evan really outlined something very important for us. Just because we're going to the Supreme Court on Tuesday, and we're praying for the full and complete ability for lesbian and gay couples to marry, there's still so much to be done. And that includes, as Evan rightly says, that the ability to be fully equal in society. You know, if you go and get married in your home state, but you have no protection for your job, you're going to get fired when you get home after the honeymoon. And that would be a terrible thing and a terrible consequence of the freedom to marry. So there's still many, many of our states that do not have protections for LGBT people in housing and in the workplace and in education and in all the places of public accommodation. And so it would be great if we had a federal bill for civil rights, as Evan pointed out to us, but most likely we're probably going to see state-by-state battles as we're seeing in these RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, which have kind of been turned on their head in each state. So it's going to take all of us who are social justice activists to be very vigilant in understanding the nuances of sometimes how when a bill had really good intent, such as the federal Religious Restoration Act, and that our own RAC had a hand in shaping in 1993, it gets turned on its head by other kinds of court interpretations, like the Hobby Lobby case last year, which turned on its head the ability of businesses to be able to discriminate based on their religious ideas, right? Didn't know that corporations went to church, did you? So they think that's one area for our own movement to be paying very close attention to. And I think the second thing is that we still have work to do within our movement in terms of educating people on the ground. It's great that we have resolutions and we put in place policy, but there's still a lot of work to be done person to person and congregant to congregant. And I think that is drilling really deep into our communities is the best way for us to make this vision of full equality for LGBT people come alive. Do you have a bathroom that could be used for a person of any gender in your building, your synagogue, or your Hillel? Do you have a policy about hiring in your congregation? And the Reform Rabbis just passed a wonderfully inclusive resolution in March about transgender rabbis and those with different gender identity and expression. Are congregations prepared to welcome and hire these inspiring rabbis as part of their teams? And if we're really going to live out what Rabbi Jacobs is teaching us about audacious hospitality, that audacious hospitality has to include welcoming everyone in our community and in our synagogues.
Judy, I think when we talk about congregations and how we affect members in our congregation, you had some experiences this year when you went to Washington to talk about your own ability to officiate at same-sex marriage ceremonies and the reaction that you had from some of your congregants who were not happy with your decision. And I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about how you face those kinds of problems, what advice you can give to clergy and members of congregations that are here about dealing with congregants or people in your communities who are not comfortable with the decisions that you're making.
So when I've stood out in front of rallies opposing Amendment 1, which was going to be a ban, it succeeded in passing a ban on gay marriage, or when we've taken caravans of couples up to Washington to have beautiful marriages, legal marriage ceremonies for them in 2011 and 2014, we've created a lot of waves in our congregation, and you want to prevent those waves from making storms that really break the ship or divide the congregation. And so the voices will say, your stance on this issue does not represent our congregation, or you're being too public on this issue, or the synagogue is a place for spirituality and not for politics. We've all heard it before. And so what do? Here's my quick 10-step program. Before I step out on the street in front of a rally, or in front of a podium on a controversial issue, number one, I do my homework. I write a statement piece, a position paper for my president. It takes time, it's a hassle, but I send him a little email or her. I say what I plan to do, the sacred texts that ground my work, the reform positions that ground my work, our congregation's history that supports my work. As clergy, we know so clearly why we're doing what we're doing, but you know what? Our presidents, who are constantly changing, they don't have the language to support us. So number one, we have to educate our presidents and our leadership before we step out there. Number two, take your congregants with you. Do not go alone. Find those who support you and have them travel with you, so it's not just your issue. Number three, make it relational. Make it an interfaith event. So when we came to Washington, we took a busload. It was with a Unitarian church, a Christian Church of Christ. 50 of us came up. We went to the Holocaust Museum. We went to Beit Mishpacha. We had a great time together. And so people can't complain that you're away from your pulpit, right? Because you're doing something meaningful. When I worked with Rabbi Jacobs, I remember we went up to Raleigh, the sisterhood, and to work on welfare reform, and we did a shopping trip along the way. So we went and lobbied in Raleigh, and then we stopped and did at the outlet malls on the way back. Whatever is going to get people where they need to go. Blogging and telling the stories of congregants helps to bring everyone along with you. When we went to Washington on our second trip, we had 6 couples. The first trip, we had 7. The 6 couples had been together 100 years collectively. And so such moving stories. You can share those and change opinion. Number 5, weigh carefully when you're speaking alone and when you want to work to have your congregation speak with you. Sometimes it's just not worth it. If it's going to be too divisive, it's not worth it. I, for one, would have been very proud to lose my job in fighting for some of these issues, but it wouldn't be worth it to divide the congregation on an issue. Number 6, create a policy on social justice advocacy. So everyone is very clear on your rights, how they support your rights as a rabbi. Our policy says that we will indeed advocate as a congregation. It's our responsibility. And it states how we'll go about the process and get consensus. And it talks about the process of bringing resolutions to the board, or if individual congregants want to bring resolutions forward. Number 7, really important, very hard to do not demonize those who disagree. Sometimes it's a little challenging when people have harsh words and hostile arguments. Number 8, educate. No one can argue with education. Number 9, develop strong clergy partnerships. You don't need to do it alone, and we had Clergy for Equality on this issue. We've just formed 2 weeks ago Charlotte Clergy Coalition for Justice, and we all help each other to stand for issues that matter to each of us individually. And then the statewide clergy were really important. So when Fred Gutman's congregation in Greensboro, his board passed a resolution opposing Amendment 1, that gave my board the passion to do the same and the commitment. And finally, I think it's really important, if you're an activist rabbi, to balance your sermons. And my father taught me at the high holidays, you should give 1 political and 1 spiritual. So Rosh Hashanah was always his political, and Yom Kippur was spiritual. There was one point where people were complaining that my sermons were really political, and it was frustrating me. And I think for several months straight, I gave really spiritual sermons, but they weren't really coming to synagogue. They weren't speaking about my sermons. They were speaking about the newspaper articles and the editorials I wrote.
That's great. Evan, you wrote a blog not too long ago about your upbringing and your family and Jewish values and how it sort of informed your work. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your Judaism has played a role in your work with Freedom to Marry and actually all the way along in your career.
Well, actually, the thing that really is most important has actually been the work with Reform Judaism and then Conservative Judaism, where first key leading rabbis, Denise being one of them, Rabbi Jacobs being one of them, Rabbi Kleinbaum, Rabbi Wenig, and many others who over the years stepped forward early on. And it made me very, very proud as somebody who is Jewish to see Jewish voices and Jewish leadership from institutional Judaism coming forward. But my own journey was always a Jewish journey. My parents, my family obviously Jewish, and we were raised to cherish our summers in Yiddish summer camp. And it was the summer camp where actually my parents met and went to camp as kids. So it was really the golden land that we would dream about all year until we could get there. And my dad would come and be the camp doctor for a few weeks so that my parents could be there in this land they loved, the place where they met. And having that as part of our family and then having that inform our family celebration of the holidays, particularly Pesach and Hanukkah, was always really a very rich and important part of our family life. Perhaps a less loved part of the family life was going to Hebrew school and so on, but we did that too. And in retrospect, I'm happy for it. And I always felt a solidarity and identification with Israel as well. I've been there several times, and it meant a lot. It was the first place my parents took us on an all-family trip when we were kids to go out of the country and to be together. And it was a huge adventure that made a big impact on us as a family. And of course, also my bonds with my grandparents. And my grandparents all came from Eastern Europe, one place or another. And they were my image of people speaking with an accent and having that tradition. And They weren't highly religious, but they were very identified as Jewish, and it was very important. And that was the world I grew up in also a somewhat Jewish neighborhood in Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh. And it was just, it was just always part of the worldview. And I think that the tradition and the view, not heavily preached, but just always there, of a commitment to social justice, a commitment to engagement in the world, an identification of being a minority and having to be there for others. The lessons particularly that resonated for me around Passover and the Festival of Freedom, and You Were a Stranger in a Strange Land, and all the things we celebrate really meant a lot to me as a kid and as an adult. And then to have that affirmed by Reform Judaism's leadership and involvement in this struggle has been very meaningful to me.
Denise and Judy, in your roles as congregational rabbis working in this field, you see faith traditions who are vehemently opposed to LGBT rights coming out. I'm curious if you could both talk a little bit about how you've developed relationships with faith communities to be supportive of LGBT rights and issues that are going on. And Evan, maybe if you want to chime in too in terms of how Freedom to Marry has helped work with some of those organizations and institutions to develop a good coalition.
Well, I'll just share a quick story. In the post-Proposition 8 days that were very difficult in California, especially for those of us that had worked so hard on the campaign to try and have Proposition 8 defeated, I just decided that too many of our communities were very isolated from one another. And so I started to work with the Los Angeles Human Rights Commission, a city-funded commission, to try and bring together different people of faith, in particular African-American ministers who had their own association that often did not meet with white folks, white ministers and clergy. And in particular, I wanted the commission to reach out to the Mormons, who, of course, it was the Mormon church who greatly funded the Proposition 8 proposition and the $40 million that was used to defeat us and take away the right to marriage. So, and it happened to be that a Reform rabbi was chair of and the executive director of the commission, Rabbi Alan Freeling, who has served for many years in Los Angeles at University Synagogue, and then in his so-called retirement became the executive director of the Human Rights Commission. So Rabbi Freeling called together a bunch of people at City Hall, and we're sitting around a table, and here I'm sitting as the only representative of the LGBT community, along with allies, straight allies who had worked to defeat Prop 8, and here were the folks that were campaigning for the passage of Prop 8, and we're sitting together, and I came in good faith. I really came in faith to say, look, we have too many other issues in our city that are burning, that are tough, that are difficult. We need to get to know one another, because I figured they just didn't know me well enough to see me as a human being. I was an other. And so we had to reach across the table to try and get to know one another. And that meeting began a lot of different kind of dialogue among different parts of the Los Angeles community. And I think it was actually really helpful, because it wasn't easy, because these were the same people that were yelling at me and calling me names and saying all kinds of things. But it was really about that relationship building. And it's very interesting, one of the LGBT ministers for the Metropolitan Community Church, who was born into a Mormon family, because of our breakfast meetings with the Mormon leadership, they were able to rebuild a personal relationship together, and he has since been able to do a lot of work in the Los Angeles area stakes to be able to raise their awareness around LGBT civil rights and life. So sometimes out of the ashes of something that was so terrible, you can rebuild something positive.
We recently had a non-discrimination LGBT city ordinance proposal come before City Council, and we were very divided. We had the conservative Christian clergy on one side and the liberals on the other, and we didn't have the time we needed for that dialogue, and we probably, in retrospect, should have come together. It happened so fast. They were really painting so negatively this city ordinance and making it a bathroom bill, really. The focus was all on the bathrooms. It was horrible, and it was hateful, so much so that one of the transgender teens in our community, who was the first North Carolina prom king, a documentary was made on him, about him. He was an outspoken advocate. He was 18 years old, and he took his life shortly after that. So I think we needed, or maybe now, we need to gather and hold each other accountable and make sure that we are always having civil discourse and not using hateful language. That leads, we think about the problem of transgender violence, which is a serious problem, and transgender discrimination, a very serious problem. And I think we need to make sure that we're very conscious about how our words can really lead to death in some cases. The other problem with when it comes to the transgender issue, when we have divides, is that a lot of the transgender community is just so frightened. We have several transgender members of our congregation that I know about, and those who have transitioned don't want to talk about it. It's no longer part of their story. If they're female, they don't want to talk about when they were male, they're now female. So it's really a challenge to get the stories out there. I am working on making a new documentary for the schools. I made Souls of Our Students in 2008, which captured the stories of 10 students, 2 African American, 2 Latin American, 1 gay, 1 lesbian, 2 low-income students, 1 in an affluent school and 1 in an impoverished school, 1 Jewish, 1 Muslim. And this documentary is in all of 10th grade for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, 145,000 students. And it's being used across the country. It's being used in congregations and businesses, Wells Fargo and Piedmont Natural Gas. So I'm now making a transgender addendum to this Souls of Our Students documentary. So I think we need those stories to create change. We come together with the more conservative congregations on other issues. And I guess we need to, when we're together, bring up some of these harder issues to discuss.
Okay, so we're going to open this up for questions and answers, but I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and ask Evan the question that would probably be the first one on everybody's lips. What do you think is going to happen on Tuesday? It's a horrible question to ask about the Supreme Court because you never know what they're going to do. I'm just curious as to how you think the argument's going to go, what your thinking is about possible results, what your thinking is if, if things don't go well, what Freedom to Marry is going to do on the next day. Just a little crystal ball from you.
You started with an easy question. So, of course, tomorrow is going to be the argument. Now, people think of the argument as this intensely important moment. And in one way it is. It is a moment where people's attention are focused. Of course, the justices are there, and they have a chance to focus. And the eyes of the country and all of us look. But the argument caps this extraordinary collective presentation that, as I said earlier, we have made to the country as well as to the courts and now to the Supreme Court. Extraordinarily important and powerful and clear and convincing briefs. A mountain of evidence that has been brought in by the parties' briefs and friends of the court in something like 70 briefs on our side supplementing the parties' briefs. There are the 65 court rulings that have already come in. And then there's this whole cumulative everything I described. So though we all feel the intensity of the moment and people are lining up in front of the court already, and I certainly wanted my seat and I want to be there. I waited online for this moment 32 years. And it will be extraordinarily exciting and moving. In some ways, we've already put the case in front of the court. And what's going to happen now, after the argument tomorrow, which of course I'm sure will be handled brilliantly by our advocates, who are my dear friend and a movement hero, Mary Bonato, a skilled and seasoned non-movement, but experienced Supreme Court litigator named Doug Hallward-Driemeyer, and the United States. The United States is coming into court, represented by the Solicitor General, advocating for the freedom to marry. And the arguments are sliced up. It's something like 2.5 hours total between those 3 advocates and their rebuttal time, plus the opposition side, the 2 attorneys who will argue for the 4 states in opposition. And there will be many, many questions. You know, you get peppered with questions. Some of them will be perhaps genuine questions. Some of them will be genuine efforts to illuminate a particular point that somebody may be wrestling with. And some of them will be gotcha, play it out moments. And we'll all talk about all of them afterwards. And then, of course, the court steps back and they go to conference, meaning they meet in their usual Friday session of just the 9 justices, and they usually ordinarily would take a vote. And we will know none of this at the time. They will, whoever's in the majority, whoever the senior judge in the majority, if it's the Chief Justice, he will get to decide who writes the opinion. And if it's 5 others, not including the Chief Justice, the most senior justice will then decide. And they'll begin writing opinions. And most likely there will be opinions and dissents, and they will circulate them and scramble around and maybe change things a little bit, perhaps in hopes of getting somebody's vote, perhaps simply to respond to what one another say. And at some point, of course, we will find out what that is. And usually it's by the end of June. Usually it is the end of June. But it, as I said earlier, it really could be any time. And then we'll have the ruling. Now, obviously, you don't need me to tell you, and we already celebrated this hope, that most experts believe we are going to win. I am very hopeful we are going to win, but nobody knows. And so what Freedom to Marry is going to do every day between today and until we get the result we're fighting for is continue pounding out this message in every way we can, that America is ready and that it's time, that there's urgency, the delay hurts. As we speak, we're running ads in the DC market aimed at shaping a climate for the media to be reporting all of this and talking about it. Freedom to Marry invested in TV ads. And the weeks before, we worked with our colleagues to get all these amazing friends of the court to file their briefs so that we could talk about the first responders who support the Freedom to Marry, the clergy, 2,000 of whom support the Freedom to Marry, far more than filed on the other side. The 226 mayors across the country, large towns and small, Democratic and Republican, who filed with the Supreme Court supporting the Freedom to Marry, 0 mayors on the other side. The 379 leading American businesses who weighed in support of the Freedom to Marry versus the 0 businesses who came in on the other side. The Republicans who filed a brief, hundreds of Republican officials and elected formers and present who came in support of the Freedom to Marry, and so on and so on and so on. We will continue finding ways every day until we get to that result. If we win at the end of June, that will mean, with perhaps a little bit of paperwork and maybe some foot dragging, but not much, I believe, it will mean that couples all across the country will be able to share in this ocean of joy that those of us who live in states that have ended this discrimination have seen, whether it be North Carolina, California, New York, or Iowa, or Oklahoma, or Utah. And American people will continue to see that this is a good thing, not a bad thing. In the ad that we're running now that I just mentioned, one of the pieces of information we put in there, and with a beautiful little graphic, is that in every state where we have won the Freedom to Marry, in every state where we've now brought the Freedom to Marry, including to these red states of Oklahoma and Utah and so on, North Carolina, South Carolina, public support has gone up. So far from there being any kind of recoil or people seeing this and watching the world crumble, actually what happens is when we make it real, when we show people what it really consists of, real people, real families, real values, real fidelity to the Constitution, support goes up. And that's what we will continue to drive home even after we win, in order to help America feel good about this and build on it for the next steps. If we don't win, it's not wood, somebody knock on wood. If we don't win, then the work will continue. And the strategy remains the strategy. The way we're going to win remains the way we're going to win. It just means we have to do it a little longer. We have to keep building that critical mass of states, keep building that public support, and go back with the right case at the right time in front of what will then have to be the right set of justices. But I'm very, very hopeful that if we keep going and keep doing what we need to do, We're going to be celebrating in June and building on that celebration to get our country closer to where we want it to be.
So when North Carolina won the right to marry, it was a stunning moment. It was 5:15, right before Shabbat was starting. We were all having, a pre-neg and a Kiddush wine bar and enjoying, and we quickly made toasts. And the next Friday night, we invited any North Carolina newlyweds who'd been married outside of state, who now were newlyweds in our state, to the bima for a blessing. And it was the most powerful moment because the 300 people in the congregation that day, not all of them were gay activists. But at that moment, they were so moved. So hopefully, perhaps at the next biennial or in June, all of us across the country will have a Shabbat to celebrate our U.S. newlyweds.
That's great, thanks. So we want to open it up. We want to open it up to questions, and I can't see how this is being done. Do we have somebody passing a mic around, or got it? Great, sorry.
First, I want to say I'm from Houston, Texas, the first city to elect an openly gay mayor, Anise Parker. So, yay, Texas. But my question really focuses on issues around transgender. We have all been awash in the celebrity of Bruce Jenner's coming out and the way too long interview. How does something like this that is in the pop culture world but yet touches all of these very important issues that you're discussing, how does that really affect or shape public opinion, popular opinion? How does something like this athlete who comes out, makes these announcements, does all the round of TV shows, and now I think every one of the Kardashians has their own show to talk about how it feels. At the end of the day, is it true that any publicity is good publicity, or how does this really factor into the efforts that are made on behalf of transgender?
Well, I think, despite what you might feel about the Kardashians and their television empires, what Bruce Jenner did took a lot of courage, a tremendous amount. And I think one of the things that we shouldn't get lost in kind of the TMZ, Entertainment Tonight, Celebrity, People Magazine, Us Magazine, is that what Bruce Jenner did the other night was to give hope to so many people of all ages. I know so many trans folks who never thought that they could transition, never had it in their mind, and they've lived in their lives as whatever their body gender was. And I just know that I'm going to see in my office over the next several weeks folks who are 50s and 60s and 70s, not just the younger folks that I encounter, but are going to be older who say, if he could do it, maybe I could still do it and feel at home in myself and be myself. And so I don't want to undercut what that interview was about, because there are so many transgender stories, not just out there, but in here, in our Reform Movement family, in our Jewish community. And it's not just something that's out there to those people. It's us. It's our kids in day school and in religious school. It's our adults sitting in our pews. It's our Hillel students. And so when we say it's the other, oh, it's the Kardashians, oh, it's them, that makes it seem like it's not ours. It is us. And so I thank Bruce Jenner for being courageous enough to step away from the paparazzi that follows him. I mean, I don't know if you know, he was in a there was a fatal car crash that he was a part of, in part because the paparazzi were following him just a few months ago. And he was in an accident where someone died. Part because he was trying to evade, it sounds like the Princess Diana story a little bit, right? Trying to evade the paparazzi. So for him to then sit with Diane Sawyer in a very serious news news way, with a serious news anchor, and to share his story, I thought was very courageous. So we have a lot of work to do to make our communities more sensitive and more aware about the issue of transgender people, and how to make our synagogues and our movement the welcoming place that it really is.
We have a congregant, and she's a professor in South Carolina. So she's a male during the day, but when she's at Bethel, she's a woman, and she doesn't want to lose her tenure as professor at this university. But she's very comfortable sharing her story. She's 6'1", but she says I'm 5'13". And we did a sisterhood women's wellness retreat at a YMCA camp, right? And she wanted to come. And so I said, sure, you can come. So she comes. I had to tell everyone. She hasn't transitioned yet. So I really had to find the women who'd be the most open in her cabin to say, are you comfortable? Every one of them were comfortable. And really, this whole Christian women's camp, we had this wonderful thing. I teach at it. They were dancing with her around the campfire, and it was a wonderful experience. I think they must have known she was transgender. I'm not sure. But she did a whole academic session on the whole history of being transgender, and talked so personally, and it's that personal story. You can't help but love her. And so the Bruce Jenner story, that can be other, because who is married to a Kardashian? You know, that just doesn't happen in all of our lives. But if you can, and thankfully so, I guess, if you can, you know, find someone who can be that voice, but know how difficult it is to share that voice.
Well, and I would just add that I talked earlier about how age shattered the silence and how important that was globally in changing the receptivity of the country for the case we were making between the first wave and the second wave of litigation. And I talked to you about the quote from Judge Shelby in Utah, that it was the knowledge of being lesbian and gay. And what I would say here is that, you know, for many, many years we used to say that the number one correlate of how people change their attitudes toward gay people was knowing someone who's gay. And we repeated that over and over and over, and we believed it, and we said it. And I remember distinctly when President Clinton, signing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and that discrimination into law, quoted that observation that we know that people change when they know someone is gay and lesbian. I was thinking, you're signing a law making it impossible for them to know who gay and lesbian people are. Why are you citing this research? But he was citing it because he was trying to help, and that's what we all said. Well, in the work of winning the freedom to marry, we dug deeper. And the research shows that actually it's not knowing someone who's gay or lesbian that changes or reduces or helps reduce prejudice. It's having a conversation with someone who's gay or lesbian, or if you can't with someone who's gay or lesbian, the research shows actually have it with a woman. But the main point is that it's conversation that is the engine of change. And the Freedom to Marry campaign was built and focused and committed to finding ways to spark those conversations. So on two levels, what Bruce Jenner did was contribute to this. Number one, we're all talking about it. All of America's talking about it. For many people, they don't have the depth of knowledge that, you know, both of you just talked about and the experience. This may be their first time having to think about it, wanting to talk about it, being forced to talk about it. But also, what he role modeled was the power, as you said, of the story, the power of conversation. And so this alone is not going to change everything. Nothing changes everything. But this is what we need to change things. And so the more we get people talking, the more we engage in conversations, the more we create the space for people to rise. And that's how change like this happens. That was the engine that drove the legal possibilities that we now see in fruition. It wasn't just going to court. It was the conversations that created the climate for us to be able to win in court.
Earlier, Evan spoke movingly about people in their 80s and 90s feeling they need to go back into the closet. And that's certainly been an issue in England, where carers in Jewish nursing homes, many of them come from traditions and communities where openness to LGBT folk simply aren't there. Now, we talk about educating our congregations, and I'm so pleased that we have managed to do so that that openness is now there in Reform and Liberal congregations in Britain. What can we do? Are there programs that exist, or is there quite a bit of work for us to do to make sure that those who care for our members also can find a way to be open to their real lives?
Oh, well, I think you probably have more.
Well, there is a lot that we can do to help our LGBT seniors in particular. Often if you imagine, let's say you've been together with your spouse for 50 years, it's time to go into some kind of assisted living. But there are many assisted living situations where they won't still recognize the couple. They may not have gotten married in their state or live in a state where you still can't get married because that was from another era. But now they're expected to not live together. They're not supposed to be with their spouse. And so it does take a bit of education to help institutions, especially dealing with seniors, whether it's a Jewish home for the aged or one of the many, at least in the States, it's many of the corporations that now have assisted livings and assisted living places. So it does take education and it does take conversations because we're lucky in Los Angeles. We have a LGBT senior living center for the Triangle Square in Hollywood, where gay seniors can live out their days being who they are. But not every place is quite so lucky. So it will continue to be a conversation and an education of professionals who work with the geriatric population to help them understand the needs of LGBT seniors as they age, to help them age in place with dignity, and to help them as they move into more institutional life.
Great. I want to, we don't have time for any more questions. I'm really sorry. And this has been just an incredibly wonderful panel. And I hope you'll all join me in thanking Evan and Denise and Judith for your wisdom.
Folks, we're going to move right into the conclusion of our conclusion of our plenary by honoring one of our great leaders, and so I want to ask people to take their seats. We're going to celebrate Beth in the next chapter of her life, but I do want to draw an incredible connection. What Rabbi Denise Eger knows, and yeah, can you hear me? Is the mic even on? Well, I just speak in the big voice. You hear me now? Okay, so a connection, something that Rabbi Denise Eger knows and that Rabbi Judy Schindler knows that Evan Wolfson completely lifts up, which is that it's all about the conversations and the relationships. And I want to just draw the connections between the wonderful program we had this morning by leaders that have crossed the usual racial lines to have sacred conversations. Those same conversations have been part of what has fueled a much broader political will around equal marriage. And so in thanking Denise and Judy for their leadership, the deep local relationships that they have created echo the relationships many others in this room have created to help build a national consensus around equal marriage. And to Evan Wolfson, once again, thank you for your work. So it's now my pleasure to move us into the mode of celebrating Steph Colin. Oh, there she is, okay. And we're joined by Jocelyn. And if you're a Facebook friend of Steph and Jocelyn, you were at their wedding. It was spectacular. And they are spectacular human beings. So in a few moments, I'm going to invite some of my colleagues to come forward and share in this celebration of Steph. But I want to take the privilege of reflecting about her with you. I hope that everybody has had the experience of thinking you're somebody's mentor and having them far exceed not only anything that you could teach them, but they become your teacher. That is the relationship that I have with Steph. When I first started this whole community organizing in the Jewish world thing at Just Congregations, Steph approached me and kind of put her finger in my face and said, why aren't we teaching this at HUC? Why aren't we empowering rabbinical students to do this? I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but you know what I mean, right? And, you know, classic community organizing, you say to the person, well, what do you want to do about it? Not always knowing if anything will come of it. Steph founded the community organizing training that now takes place on the campuses of HUC in New York, on HUC in Los Angeles, and we fly students from the Cincinnati campus to the LA campus to participate in. Dozens and dozens. What year did you start it, Steph? So for 10 years, around 12 or 15 rabbis, and also now cantors, educators, and other Jewish professionals have taken the community organizing training, which means there's more than 100 of us who are trained, which is changing the universe. Because what it means is that there's waves and waves of leaders, of rabbis and Jewish professionals and clergy like Rabbi Steph Colin and like so many in this room who know how to build the relationships, how to create the power and make real change in their communities. But they're also knowing how to build and reframe their synagogues to be more relational and relevant to their own communities. You know, I remember talking to a rabbi of a Reform congregation who went on one of these trainings that Steph co-founded and said, this was the best professional development I ever had. And he wasn't just talking about the social justice stuff. It was, how do I actually build a leadership team in my synagogue? How does that leadership team go into the synagogue and have relationships? How do those relationships then build an actual community of sacred purpose together? That's the first part of Steph Colin's legacy. And Dayenu. When I was blessed to have Steph join us on the professional staff at Just Congregations 4 years ago, I was stuck. I'm just going to be really honest. Because up until that point, Just Congregations had done a really good job of kind of convincing congregations they should organize. And we were good at it. You know, when we started, there were like 5 or 10 now. I think, how many, Steph? Like 260 Reform congregations that are organizing congregations that are part of Just Congregations. We should definitely celebrate that. But we were very limited by where there was really strong local organizing. Like if you happen to be in Boston and part of GBIO and you saw a lot of the GBIO people, then you're great. But if you're in a community that doesn't have a broad-based group, or if you're in a community where the broad-based group is mediocre or doesn't do such great work, you're kind of stuck. And also, frankly, we don't only want to do what the agenda is of the broad-based group. We have a much broader agenda. You just heard one of the key elements of our agenda today that isn't always part of what a broad-based group would do. And I was stuck trying to figure out, well, how do we actually organize our congregations directly to act as Reform congregations? And Steph said, I think I have an idea. And she called it Reform California. It was the notion that she could move around the state, identifying the right leaders, rabbis and other Jewish professionals and volunteer leaders who could come together and take all the things we know about organizing, how you build a network of relationships, how you take direct action, and how you make change. And she did it with an incredible leadership team. They built Reform. How many congregations in Reform California? 60, 70 Reform congregations. That's like all of the Reform movement in California, all engaging. And they not only did it, so they didn't just do the fun part, lots of one-on-ones, lots of house meetings, lots of coming together and feeling like a movement, but then they picked an issue, the Trust Act, and they won. They made California a safer place for immigrants to this country who won't be deported because law enforcement now can't go after them and give them over to the federal government. Those families are safer in California because of Reform California. And hundreds of millions of dollars have been directed to the construction of affordable housing for the people who need it the most because they acted and they won. She got us unstuck. And so what I want to say about you, Rabbi Stephanie Colin, as you move to this next chapter, which is going to be an amazing and wonderful chapter, not just for you and Jocelyn and Central Synagogue in Manhattan and the city of New York, it will be. You're going to have a phenomenal next act. It'll be great for us because you know how to lead. You will never stop being a leader of this Reform Jewish movement for justice. And so it's my pleasure now to call upon some of your friends who are going to help me continue to celebrate you and your leadership among us. Whatever role you have, whatever job you do, you will always be our leader. So I want to ask now Jen Kaufman, who's not just the chair of the CSA, she is also a leader of Reform California. Rabbi Rob Nosenchuk, our leader of the emerging Reform Ohio. Rabbi Esther Letterman, who's coming over from Temple Mike in Washington to join the URJ staff. And Rabbi Joel Simons, who is an amazing leader of Reform California. So come on up.
All right, Steph, I get the honor of going next. You have led Just Congregations for these past 4 years as our leader, as our rabbi, and pushed us to make the issue of social and economic injustice facing our country the issue that we need to be organizing around. You've done incredible face-to-face, rigorous, movement-building work by infusing us, your leaders, with the power of imagination, relationship and action, as well as a healthy dose of a sense of humor, which is top-notch. You have shown us how we can strengthen and transform Reform Jewish communities to help us transform America and in turn the lives of all who call this country home. And under your leadership, Just Congregations has built increasing power and made significant change in the world. So just to highlight some of these general accomplishments over the past 4 years, Jonah lifted up the number. We have 260 Reform congregations in 32 states doing the work of community organizing. That is pretty incredible. Just Congregations has trained and mentored over 150 Reform rabbinical students. I was one of them in that first class, so thank you for making that happen. And you've helped nurture 48 of them who have completed intensive Just Congregations rabbinic organizing internships in congregations in California, Ohio, New York, and New Jersey. Just Congregations has cumulatively raised $4 million for Reform movement social justice efforts, which is pretty... Maybe you didn't know you'd raise that much. And lastly, something really close to my heart. You've partnered with the RAC and the CCAR to help create the National Organizing Initiative of Rabbis, Organizing Rabbis, and of course, as Jonah lifted up, the statewide Organizing Initiative of Reform California, which leads us next to Jennifer.
Steph, because of your leadership, in California, we've engaged more than 100 Reform communities in Reform California's grassroots organizing efforts to renew the California dream for all Californians, and we've celebrated 2 victories. Your work to organize us has led to 3 million immigrants in California no longer fearing that contacting the police for help or having a minor infraction like selling food without a license will lead to their deportation and separation from their families.
And that was just the beginning. When we were done with that, we regrouped and we gathered again. We went around the state and we fought for 2 issues in one campaign, for the environment and for affordable housing. Through the funds of cap and trade, we were able to take hundreds of millions of dollars to build affordable housing near rapid transit, cutting down our greenhouse gas emissions and building homes for people who are in need. And then in your last week, when most people would be packing up their books and saying goodbye, you launched us on another campaign to chip away at structural racism through a new campaign to end racial profiling. For that, we are forever grateful.
8th century Judean community organizer Isaiah said, Simu Elai Rodfe Tzedek, listen to me, you who pursue justice. Umevakshei Adonai, you who seek the eternal. He'ebitu el tzur hutzavtem, look to the rock out of which you are hewn. Val malkebet bor nukartem, to the quarry out of which you are dug. Rabbi Stephanie Colin, your steel backbone, your determination for a more just world has been a rock for so many of us determined to raise our voices in courage. More important, your call for and your ability to deliver on the ideal of kindness as the baseline for all of your interactions has been a quarry, a safe quarry out of which the human spirit can grow. You are beloved, you're appreciated, and there are some of us here today who can say it and others who are not. So the Just Congregations community wanted to make sure that as you head on your next journey, you heard from many others who love and respect you most. And here they are.
It's a bird.
It's a plane!
No, it's...
Steph Colin, Reform California's very own superhero for social justice.
We asked the citizens of the world, or rather, reform movement leaders across America, to tell us what they think about this force for good.
Steph Colin is like every superhero we've ever known, but imbued with Jewish goodness and a wicked sense of humor to boot.
Rabbi Steph Colin is a phenomenal religious leader. In a word, she's a rock star.
Precise and powerful, not a word wasted.
Steph is delightful, dynamic, and dogged. I'll be on her team any day.
Wise, compassionate, powerful, determined, and wickedly funny. What I know about community organizing, I learned from you, my teacher, my friend, my partner. Forever thanks.
Stephanie, when I think about you, I think of Pog. You're passionate, outspoken, and I'm so grateful to know you.
My prophet, and now my friend. I'm gonna miss you so much in California.
Stephanie is an extraordinary leader who inspires and empowers everyone.
Steph Colin is one of the best teachers, mentors, and friends that I have ever had, and she's delightfully fun at the same time.
Steph, my dear friend, you have been my rabbi since before you were a rabbi. And I'll tell you this, Reform California is a pretty awesome platform, but only because you have built it with your wit, your wisdom, your charm, humor, and passion.
A modern-day prophet who's challenged me to grow so much that my capacity for love has increased.
Steph, you are the flame that ignites relationship building, story sharing, and action.
Yes, we'll miss Steph's inspiration and her political savvy, but even more, we'll miss her infectious laugh and that she's so much fun.
Steph, you are a modern-day prophet whose tenacity, determination, and passion for all that is good and just in this world truly inspires me. May you go from strength to strength and continue to do great work.
Steph's belief in the ability of others and her incredible humility have made me a better leader and a better person.
Steph Colin is an innovator who always finds new ways to bring old friends into our ancient project of bringing justice to our world.
Stephanie Colin. Some translate Malach Adonai as angel. I translate it as Steph Colin, a purpose-filled, fearless, humane messenger of our highest ideals.
This world is a better place because of you and your leadership. I think of you as my rabbi. I think of you as my friend. You inspire me. You agitate me. Most importantly, you make me laugh.
Steph is a rabbi's rabbi. She knows how to help rabbis be the best versions of themselves. She knows how to help them act powerfully on their own self-interest.
Stephanie, we couldn't have created Reform CA without you. Thank you for making Tikkun Olam possible in California. We are all going to miss you and wish you all the best in your new endeavors.
Steph Colin, you're our rabbi and our friend. You brought us from strength to strength. We love you.
Make for yourself a rabbi and acquire for yourself a friend. Steph, you have been a friend to all of us, but perhaps most importantly, a rabbi to each and every one of us, helping us come together to build the world as it ought to be, and I'm grateful to you for having brought me into this work when we were together in rabbinical school. So over the years, I've indeed acquired for myself a rabbi and a friend.
Steph Colin has changed the way our movement takes action.
With humility, passion, and great heart, Steph shows us how to be the rabbis and the human beings that we long to be.
Stephanie, it is such a joy to see someone like you doing exactly the work you were made to be doing. And I'm so happy you're going to be doing it here in New York City. Welcome home, Stephanie.
Steph, your superpowers will continue to inspire your friends at Temple Solel and in Phoenix. Give them hell in the Big Apple. Go get them, Steph.
The greatest thing about this superhero is she's real. Toda Rabba, Bechatzlaha. We love you, Steph.
It has been our great, great blessing to be your colleague and to be inspired for both of us and for so many others by your tireless devotion to building the vision of a just world and moving this movement.
On behalf of the Just Congregations community, we want to give you a new shofar. You have been sounding this shofar and sounding out the call of justice. And I hope that the shofar reminds you, as Governor Patrick reminded us, to amplify the whispers of kindness. I know you will continue to do so, and it's not a telephone, but we will be calling you. We will be calling you and calling upon you often, and we know you will be there.
Thank you so much. I don't have any words. Listen, I should throw this.
Thank you. Man, I've never been on the head of a flying thing before. Okay. Thank you for everything that you just did and everything that you just said. I'm incredibly moved and incredibly overwhelmed by it. I'm particularly honored for any of that to be said in front of this body of people who emanates and is just committed to, with your lives and your lay leadership and your rabbinates and your cantorates and your educatorships, to dedicate yourselves to changing this world. I don't think I can speak the words that I need to tell you how grateful I am and how honored I feel. I will give it a shot. So I want to start with a quick story, as we just heard from the brilliant panel that was just up here, how central story is. I want to share a story briefly from our second campaign, the Wander No More campaign for affordable housing in California. We were in Sacramento to lobby our legislators to ask them to vote for this this budget piece that we were asking for, and there was a meeting with Assemblymember Ridley Thomas, and it was representing maybe 3, 4, 5 maybe congregations all at once who are all represented by him, and it's rabbis and his lay leaders, and they are ready, and they sit down in front of him, and they tell him exactly why he should be voting for greater affordable housing near transit-oriented development in California. And he looks at them and he says, "Do your congregations build housing?" And they looked at him absolutely baffled, and they said, "No." And he said, "What are you doing here? I don't understand. What is your interest in this issue? I really don't understand. I'm so glad to see you, Jews, but what are you doing here?" And It was actually Rabbi Tamara Eskenazi, who's a great Bible scholar of our movement, and a great rabbi, and also a great organizing leader at Leo Beck Temple in Los Angeles. And she said, she flipped at him. She was like, Assemblymember Ridley Thomas, we are Jews. This is in our DNA. We know what it's like to wander the desert 40 years without a roof over our heads. We know what it's like to be homeless in our blood and in our bodies. And so for whoever wanders without a roof over their head today, we must stand with them and we must act with them. And this man, who is Assemblymember Ridley Thomas, who is a Christian man of deep faith, he said, all right then, let's get to business. Now we understand each other. Let's do this. And so I want to take up most of my time by offering just immense gratitude. This was incredible, and I am deeply honored, but it should be abundantly clear that the secret to this work is that it is never one person. I just happen to be the person in this position, and I am surrounded by people who have taught me and who have guided me and have supported me and have led with me and partnered and allied with me. And so I am standing here, quite frankly, if you could just imagine the masses surrounded, I'm just being their mouthpiece for the moment. So in gratitude to a few sets of people. First, to all of my teachers and mentors and rabbis and lay people who have placed justice at the center of what it means to be a Reform Jew. Who have said and who have taught me from my earliest beginnings at East End Temple in New York City as a child that our call as Jews is to participate in the healing of suffering and the repair of this world. And the current people who are leading our movement, Rabbi Rick Jacobs and Rabbi Jonah Pesner and Rabbi David Saperstein and Steve Sachs and Rabbi Steve Fox and Rabbi Denise Eger, and all of those people, and I know that I did not just name them all, who lead our movement towards justice and challenge us to act in ways that live out our values in the public square, not as some side thing. Oh, and then there's social justice. And then let's, learn and have holidays and ritual. And also, if there's time, let's repair the world. But rather as central to our identity, that we cannot be fully the Jews we need to be unless we are engaged in the healing of our broken world. I want to say to my Just Congregation staff, to these women, Julie Weil and Joy Friedman, these are two of the most talented, compassionate, kind, creative, brave, courageous, and brilliant women and human beings that I have ever worked with. They make every staff meeting an action. They make our work together illuminative, and they fill me with utter a sense of belief and vision in the world that's going to come. I am positive as I step out of this position, I'm not just leaving this in good hands, I am leaving this in the best hands. And I think I'm just so grateful to the two of you as my partners and allies in building and shaping and growing Just Congregations. We do this work together. To the RAC team, there's so many of you, I'm super not gonna name you all. But I will say 4 of you, Sam, Sean, Barb, and Rachel. I don't know if you're in this room. I know you are often running around doing something at warp speed. But those folks partner with Just Congregations, the entire RAC team does. But those folks in particular have been my partners and have raised up our work and helped us get out campaigns at the last second and moved on things that have allowed us to touch the base and touch DC all at the same time so that we can lift up this country and North America wide. I'm very grateful to them. I want to single out Jonah because I'm talking about the RAC for a second. Man, today was a good day, Jonah. We have been through a lot of this together. We have walked this path together in so many ways, and you have been my teacher, and you have told me when it is time to fish or cut bait, and you have pushed me and agitated me and taught me. You've been my friend, and we've carried this together, and I am so grateful to you for the space that you make. And today is a good day for the Jewish people, and it's a good day for the world as you take the mantle of the Religious Action Center. The Reform California leadership team, if you're in the room, would you just raise your hand? If you are on the leadership team, and if you are a congregational point person, and if you are the son of a congregational point person, I see you, Ruben. We have a team of lay leaders and rabbis in California who, to me, they are like the X-Men. I know that was Superman. Superman's awesome. They are like the X-Men, each of them coming up to this space to guide and lead. And they have jobs that they put their own, their paid jobs, where they put their blood, sweat, and tears there. They work so hard to lift the state of California and to achieve the California dream again for all Californians, for the most vulnerable Californian families. And it has been an honor to learn with them and work with them. And I can't believe the blessed luck that I have had to have this team in my life. Jennifer Kaufman, oh my God. If you ever had that amazing friend who is also your AP government teacher, who knows how Sacramento works without Jennifer Kaufman? You've been my right hand, and this movement is so lucky to have you. The Rabbis Organizing Rabbis team, who's led by Joy Friedman, and the Just Congregations Rabbinic Leadership team, who, so if I've been with Just Congregations for 5 years, that means that there were 4 years of Just Congregations where I didn't even exist. I was existing at Temple Israel with their crazy, amazing team. All of the Just Congregations leaders who have been growing this organization for 9 years now are outstanding leaders in our community, and I count them as my friends. And then finally, for the last thank you, I think, my mentors, of course, Mayor Lakin is not here, but he has raised up a generation of young organizers. Some of you in this room have benefited deeply from his leadership. He's just like the most sarcastic, awesome, Orthodox Jewish organizer that's out there. And of course, Arnie Graff, who we met earlier today. And I want to thank my wife, Jocelyn, that was 6 months ago, wife, it still sounds good, who I could not do this without you. So thank you so much, sweet girl. Thank you. And my parents, of course, who, our families, they make us very, very strong, and we could not do this without them. Okay, the secret to this work is surround yourself with people who are talented, who are ready to throw down with you and take enormous risks with you to make great change in the world. And I am blessed to have only the greatest of partners. So to wrap, the world right now is full of hope and it's full of possibility, and I really believe that. And it is deeply broken and deeply in need of repair. There are tremendous structural racisms and economic inequalities in our country, and right now we have a choice, and there are two results that could come out of this moment. Our choices could result in deeper divides between races and economic classes, or this moment, if we choose to act, if we choose to reach across lines of difference, if we choose to amplify the voices of people of color in this day, if we choose to tell our real stories and listen so hard to the stories of other people, if we choose to be strategic, if we choose to build our power, if we choose to stand together, if we choose to, as we've been taught over and over today, and if we take away nothing from today, it should be that we should shout out love, that is the baseline and that is the starting point, then all of this could result in a world that is much closer to redemption. A final piece of Torah. There's that moment where Moses stands at the shore of the sea, and we're with Moses, and we are cranky, and we are snarky, and we are scared out of our minds because there's this tumultuous sea before us, and it shows no signs of parting, and our enslavers are right on our heels, and they're ready to re-enslave us, and we are whining and complaining, and Moses says to us, Tacharishun, you guys hush up, watch, as God will do battle for you today. And then Moses, you could watch, just turns towards God in this great moment of expectation. And God says, Moses, mati takelai, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people, v'yisa'u, tell the people to go forward. And so we moved our bodies together from slavery to freedom. And God moved our souls from oppression to redemption. And so I want us just to offer this prayer. Let us grab the hands of all who stand with us on this side of the tumultuous sea, v'yisa'u. Let us go forward together and let us make those waters part. Thank you for the great honor of leading Just Congregations. Thank you for the great honor of today, and thank you for the great honor of allowing me to continue this journey with you.
best in the business. You really are the best in the business. So stay here, Rabbi Colin, and everybody stay standing, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to bless Steph on her way, and Jocelyn as well. So Jocelyn, you come forward, and I want to invite Jennifer back, Rob back, Esther back, and Joel. And I want to ask Rabbi Mona Alfie, Rabbi Chuck Briskin, Rabbi Seth Limmer, Rabbi Shoshana Conover, and Rabbi Adam Spilker to join me. And now everybody to come close. Leave behind the chairs. Leave behind the bureaucracy of this luxurious crystal ballroom. We're all going to come close. Come close. It's okay. It's the last program, the last plenary. You're going to go off to workshops anyway. We can let go of the chairs, so come as close. Don't come cose. There's a whole thing here. We're all going to say it together. Esther's doing line one, translating line one. Mona, you're going to translate line two. Okay. And I'm going to keep line three. So everybody come close to be part of this blessing. And any distinguished clergy or any lay people who know the blessing are welcome to join with us. Everybody take a breath. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha.
May the Holy One always turn towards you with kindness and with compassion.
May you go forth, Steph Colin, with all of us who love you, hand in hand, as God's partner in the transformation of the world as it is, which is parched with injustice, to the world that you have shown us it can be, the world of justice. Blessings, love, and peace. Amen. And now go forth to workshop. No. Don't listen to me. Listen to Bart. That's the rule at the rack. Don't listen to me. Listen to Bart.
Well, if there's one thing we know from both Rabbi Stephanie Colin and the sages of superheroes past, it is that with great power comes great responsibility. And so many of us throughout this movement have taken that power and transformed it into acts of responsibility towards our communities, people that we know, people that we don't know, and now we have a chance to learn from them in the workshops. All the workshops are happening in Presidential Hallway, and then after that, we're going to come back to this room and prepare together to lobby our senators and representatives tomorrow. So if you are going to Capitol Hill tomorrow, please make sure to come back to this room for lobby prep, and we'll see you then. Enjoy the workshops.